So the interfaces are developed now, and this is the PagePerson interface. And what we now have to do is we have to do the things that we need to invoke so that actions can take place behind this particular form or page, sorry. So behind each page there is a code file, and it's listed as a sort of sub-item of the page, the XAML file. You've got the XAML.cs, and really the interface can't run without the code, and the code can't run without the interface. So these are very much tied together in terms of what we've got. So if I now open up the code file for the PagePerson, this is what you get. This is the out-of-the-box particular structure, and you'll see that in line 28 it says that it's a child of page, and that's how you inherit PagePerson. So this is a partial class. So this class here, along with the XAML class, makes up the page. So it's a really side-by-side dependent thing that has to be together in order for it to work. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to now develop the application inside this particular code file. So we're going to do it in several stages, and I think we'll manage to get it done in one video, but it's not huge. It's a little bit tricky, but it's not huge. So I'm just going to do it step by step. So in the code that we're given, the only thing we really get is what's called a constructor, and this is what makes the page happen. And we're going to put some things into that particular constructor to make certain things happen for us every time the page is created and loads. But what we need to do first is we need to provision a tracking variable so that we can keep track of whether we've had success in getting the data from the page or not. And I've got it on my clipboard. So this is a Boolean variable called form data valid. Initially assigned the value false, and it's internal because we're only using it inside this particular module. We never need to do this outside the module. So what we need to do now is we're going to get certain things to happen every time our page is loaded. So what I'm going to add here is we're going to say that every time this page is loaded, we will clear the text boxes. Now there's a neater way for us to do this, but we're going to just do this way for the start. The text box for the person name, the age and the weight will be given the value of string.empty. Now one thing that I frequently do when I'm making an application, and you're going to be doing a lot of starting and closing the applications, you don't want to be testing this every time. So what we've got to do is we don't have to do this at all, sorry. What I frequently do is I have a set of dummy data ready. And what we do is that when I want this to work, I just uncomment that. And when this page loads now, that data will be put into the text box. So it's just something that you might think about doing, that when you're developing the application, it's convenient to have certain things happen automatically. And some of this is dummy data that would be really good to load, so that you don't have to keep typing it out. I know it's not onerous, but it might just help to save a few minutes when you're doing that. And then you just mark it up with that debug data, remove on completion, and people will understand exactly where you're coming from with this data. All code has to run as a result of an action in this type of application. So in fact we're building what's really an event-driven interface backed up with classes that use object-oriented programming. In fact, most applications are a mixture of different paradigms of programming, and in this case we're mixing event-driven, which is the button pushing, because we've got buttons here, yeah, and they're going to run code in the code behind module here. So how do we get that code to run? Right, so for each of our buttons we have to add an event, and the event is called the click event. So if I just get that up so that they're side by side so that we can see what's happening, I go to this line here, 98, and before the closing tag bracket I start a new line and I type the word click, and it should start to give me the IntelliSense. I then press tab, and it says new event handler is being offered to us. So I press tab, and it names it automatically for us. What it does is it picks up the name of the button itself, and that's why it's good to name the button before you create the events, and then says, oh, he wants a click event because that's what I asked for. So we're going to need a button event, a click event for activities. So I need to go here and I click that, and it raises out, it sort of selects the code here, and I'm doing exactly the same as I did before. Go to the end before the closing tag of the button, and put click, and it starts to pick up things. So tab, now look, it can see the other click event. So what we want to do is pick out that one, which is the new event handler, so that we don't assign the same click to the same event, and do that. So that's how it's now got those two click events. If I go into either one, well, let's choose the clear click. If I press F12, it takes us straight into the code structure. Now this is where we should really, in order to be professional in our coding, we should do 3 tabs, and the events, just a short description. And this is really it's unnecessary, I suppose, but it adds a little bit of professionalism to the code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an event in this clear button, but I'm going to do a little bit different, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the thing I want to happen separately, and then just call it when the button is clicked. And the advantage of that is that regardless of what I code to happen, it will always work on the press of this button. And we may choose in advance, later in the development process, to change what happens inside the click event. So down below this activities button, I like to put these things at the bottom of the page, underneath the things that will happen in the I can't type today. Can't type any day. I'm quite surprised. I'm going to call this clear controls, and the purpose of this method is to make all of the text box empty, ready for new actions to happen. So let me just raise that up here. Now I've got the code on my clipboard, so it's exactly the same as we've done before. The person box, the name box, the age box, the weight box will be emptied, and then this is a little bit different, is we put the focus back into the name box, because that's where we expect the data entry to happen first. That's the first thing we ask them to enter. So I can now make that work when I call the button. And that will then run this code when that button is clicked. So this should have made you think about something, is that we've got this method called clear controls, which does the work of clearing all the controls, but didn't we do that here? So what I can do is, because I now have this method, and I did it by separation rather than putting it into the control button click, I can now just replace that code there, clear controls, and that does it. And that's one of the great beauties of coding in this way, is that we create a function or a method. So what we're doing here is a little bit of procedural programming. We have a procedure, which is a method or a function, and we're calling it in different places as we need it. So that should have made you think about that. And if you didn't, I mean maybe you don't understand that enough yet, but that should help you to understand why we do things in that way. So I create it once and use it here and here. And if I change the code here, it'll work in both places without me having to maintain separate code files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a halt at this point. I thought I would get it all done in one video, but I think the video would go to about 25 minutes, and that's far too long. So I'm going to call a halt here and then pick it up in the next video again.